Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. So I have all of these videos planned that I wanted to do that involved, some research and some scripting. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do those right now. I'm a little bit of a mess, which is completely my fault, by the way. I have 5 manuscripts right now that are in various stages of pre-publication. So that's, you know, going to professional editors. I've had professional editors go through them, and now I need to go through them. They've been drafted, and I need to now do my self edits, or one of them I'm in the middle of drafting. Actually, not the middle, I'm in the beginning stages of drafting. I've only got 4 chapters done. But anyway, I have 5 manuscripts I'm working on, and I have 2 paintings that I'm working on. My office is a complete mess, and I'm very scatterbrained at the moment. So you're not getting one of the nice, carefully scripted, pre-planned videos today. Instead, I'm going to do a more relaxed video where I'm just going to sit here and kind of talk to you about writing and my career and advice. So I currently have 4 books published under my T.R. Sloth pen name. 4 books published. My first book published back in 2020. That feels like forever ago. I published my first book back in 2020. Okay, that just kind of hit me. But I now have 4 books published, and I made a lot of mistakes during that time period, publishing all of those books, getting all those books written, and I've noticed a lot of things, and I just want to share those experiences with you. And if you're a new author, I hope this is going to be helpful for you. And even if you're not a new author, maybe I don't know, maybe this will be something you can pick up too, or maybe you'll have something you can add in the comments for other authors who are new. So, one of the big things I want to talk about is advice, right? I'm doing an advice video for authors, so I'm going to talk about advice. Well, the problem is that advice is a dime a dozen. It is everywhere. There are so many YouTube channels, blogs, Instagram accounts, etc., 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 giving writing advice. But the problem is not all of this writing advice is going to be great, and not all of it is going to pertain to you and your story and how you're writing. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first started writing is that I was so worried I was going to screw up. I didn't want to be that person that they wrote their manuscript and then they absolutely refused to take advice from their editors or their beta readers. I didn't want to be that person. And so I took too much advice, and I kind of thought that if I listened to everybody, I could get it right the first time. And I think anybody who's been doing this for a while will let you know your first book isn't going to be perfect. You're going to learn more from writing multiple books than you will from getting advice on your first book. I hope that makes sense. So, the longer you're in the world of writing, the more books you write, that's going to help you learn. So, don't expect to always get it right the first time. And now I'm not trying to say that you should expect your first book to be bad. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that you are going to learn and grow with every single book that you finish and every single book that you publish. How subjective the world of entertainment is, I think that's also another really important thing that needs to be factored into who you take advice from and how you process that advice. Because let's be honest, yes, there's right way to spell things, there's right way to do grammar, but even in the world of grammar, there's more than one style of editing. I think my editor does like the Chicago Manual, but there's more than one style. So even that bit of objective writing advice isn't always concrete. The big problem is that people will hear advice and they take it to heart, and they don't always think about it of how it pertains to them. What do I mean by this? Well, there are certain people, the certain readers who really like dialogue heavy books. There are certain readers who love exposition. There are readers who love first person, and there are readers who prefer third person. All of these things are subjective. And if you take advice from someone who says, no, you should only ever write in first person, that's not going to be helpful. And I think I have noticed that there are a lot of author accounts on YouTube or wherever, where they'll say this is the only right way to do something. I really think that if you're trying to learn as an author and get advice, if there's a channel who is telling you there is only one right way to do something, that should be a red flag. And you should really take a critical look at what they're telling you. Because with anything that is artistic or entertainment, it's going to have subjective pieces to it. There's going to be things that some people like and some people don't like about art and entertainment. I mean, that's why we have so many different genres and so many different subgenres and so many different styles. This one account that I used to follow, and this was way back when I first started, and I had to step away from this account because, oh man, they gave some really bad advice. Not all of it was bad, but it got to the point where this person, I don't know if they were doing it just for views or clicks, but all of their advice was my way or the highway. And I really don't like that. I think that there's a lot of wiggle room and there's a lot of room for interpretation, especially with writing, and there's a lot of room to take risks and try something new. If you never try anything new, how are you going to know if it works or not? And this is really true with tropes. There's a lot of people who make names for themselves by doing videos and blogs about tropes you should never do and why certain tropes are awful. I honestly am of the opinion that anything can work if it's written well. On one of them, I'm probably going to do more in-depth videos about the tropes specifically because that's a pretty common one now. I see so many people saying like this trope should never be written, this trope should never be used. And it's fine if you personally just don't want to read about it. Like I know in romance, the pregnancy trope is a big one. It's very divided. Like people either love it when there's pregnancy in their romance books or they don't. And that's fine. You're allowed to not like something, but the idea that if you don't like it, that means no one should ever write it, I don't agree with. And I really do think that there's wiggle room for interpretation. I'm going to say that a lot. But there's also room for, the phrase, the customers always write in matter of taste. And that's true for entertainment. I mean, it's not like you're building a house and it has to be waterproof. You're writing a book to entertain someone. And the different people are going to be entertained by different things. So one of the tropes that I've heard people complain about is, I don't remember the name of it, but it's like you're telling someone a story and they're like, oh, well, you've already heard all the stories. And they're like, oh, I don't care. Tell me again. Okay, yeah, if a 40-year-old adult is saying that, that's really weird. But I don't know, you ever hung out with kids under the age of 10? They do stuff like that all the time. They want to hear the same story over and over again. So I think if you're writing out about a kid, that's completely understandable. Kids want to repeat everything. They want to rehear the same story. Or they forget. One of my nephews forgets everything. It's kind of funny. His parents will tell him to do something or they'll tell him a story and 2 seconds later he'll just be so surprised when it gets brought up again because he completely forgot. It's entertaining because I'm the aunt and I don't have to live with it. The other trope that gets a lot of hate is the not like other girls trope. I have a blog post about this and I don't like the trope, but that doesn't mean it should never be written because honestly, I have met women who act like that. And especially when you're a teenager, I think that's pretty common for adolescent girls to act like that and have that attitude as a form of rebellion against society and societal expectations for them because they're a girl. So it's not necessarily that these tropes should never be written, but they should be written and handled correctly. I do think that if you're watching advice videos or you're reading writing advice blogs, you should always take what people are saying with a grain of salt. And you should always really strongly consider what your story is and how you want to tell your story. Because there's no one right way to do it. I mean, there's this awful phrase, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I hate that phrase, but I can't think of a better way to put it right now off the top of my head. So when you're doing something that is entertainment and creative, such as writing, there's a lot of room for interpretation, and I don't like the idea that there's only one right way to do things. And I've also noticed that a lot of not all of them, there's some of them that do this and some of them that don't. I think the ones that do it are just more vocal about it. They'll pick an author who's a household name or has done very well for themselves, and they'll say, well, this author is successful, therefore I have to copy every single thing that this author does. I have to copy their exact writing schedule. I have to copy how they write their prose. And I don't really agree with that. I think that you can look at different authors and collect advice and try different things and see what works for you. Some people work really well if they get up really early and they write before the rest of their family is up or the rest of their household is up or before they have to go to work. That works really well for some people. I tried it and I fell asleep at my desk. So that doesn't work for me. And some of the other writing advice is, just put pen to paper, write no matter what, which is great for building habits. And some people, but sometimes you really do need to take a break. Sometimes you really do need a mental break. And there's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't feel shame because the writing community is telling you that you need to write every single day no matter what. No, sometimes you need a mental break or sometimes you need a physical health break. And I honestly don't think that writing every day is necessarily constructive. And like, because listen, I am now a full time author. Do I write every day? No. There are times where I just edit. There are times when I just work on marketing. There are times I just work on plot. And there are days I don't do any of it. And I'm just cleaning my house to give myself a break. And while I'm like mopping or sweeping or whatever I'm doing, in the back of my mind, I'm running plots or character arcs. And honestly, I think I do some of my best thinking when I'm doing something else. And so that way I have that mental break and I can come back and finish writing, or I can jot down what I need to make my work. There's another piece of advice that I hear all the time that's don't edit while you're writing. Well, that might work for some people, but I cannot prescribe to that because anytime I try it, if I'm working on chapter 7 and something comes up in chapter 7 and I realize, oh shoot, I don't think that this is consistent with what happened in chapter 2. If I don't go back and check chapter 2 and fix that to make sure it's consistent, that is going to bother me. And that's all I'm going to be able to think about the whole time I'm trying to write chapter 7 and beyond. And I really, sometimes I just need to reread what I've already written to help me flow into the next chapters. I don't know if that makes sense. Not everyone is like that though, and that's fine. I don't think that there's any one right way to do it. So some people love editing while they write. Some people can't. They just want to get the whole thing done and then go back and edit, and that's fine. I really think that if you're new to writing, or even if you've been writing for a little bit and you feel like it's not going as smoothly as it should, you should try new things. There's nothing wrong with trying a new method or trying a different way of approaching things. I think that can be really, really helpful because this can be a really mentally and emotionally taxing thing to do. If you're writing books that are high emotion or high action and you're really putting yourself in your character's shoes while you're writing, that can be mentally and emotionally exhausting. I know that happens to me sometimes. Like when I was writing my Legends of Lightning series, I really put myself in the characters in those positions, and there's times when I'm writing those battle scenes or those death scenes or those torture scenes and it just is exhausting and I need to step away after I do that. Yes, this job can be very taxing sometimes, and I think it's totally fine if you need a break. It's fine if you need to, if you've been doing it for years and you found that it's not going the way that it used to, try something new. There's nothing wrong with that. And another piece of advice that I see floating around the author sphere all the time is plotting versus pantsing. I don't know why it's pantsing. I think it's because you're flying by the seat of your pants. But there are people who will do these really, really detailed, structured plots with like the different acts and everything that happens in each act of the story. And that's great. If that helps you, that's fantastic. Every time I have tried to do that, I want to put my head through a wall. It is so frustrating to me and it feels too rigid. And it gets to a point where I'm writing down all the details of the plot and I'm like, I'd rather just be actually writing the scene. And it's very difficult for me to work off of a highly structured plot like that. Now, sometimes I will definitely go through and I'll have like a bullet point list of everything I want to happen, especially in like my epic saga when I have like it's going to be 4 books that all tie in together. That gets messy. So I definitely have like my list of things that need to happen and things that need to tie in together. But I personally have a really hard time functioning within that very rigid and structured plot outline. And there are some people that don't even write bullet points, they just go for it. And there have definitely been times where I've written books without even writing my bullet point list. I just start writing and I know in my head what I want to happen. But for some of my books, I honestly am just like, this is going to be character driven. So I'm going to make my character and let them take it from there. Now, not every book is going to be like that. Some books are very, very character driven, some books are very, very plot driven, and there's nothing wrong with either of those. And I think if you're writing a character driven and you don't want a strict plot structure, that can work. It's fine. But if you're writing something that's really plot heavy and you need that, go for it. There's nothing wrong with using either method or neither method. And so this is just something that I've noticed in the writing community that has been bothering me for a little bit. There's no one right way to do things, and I really do think that if someone is sitting there telling you, you can't be a writer unless you do it exactly this way, oh my God, get a life. Like, seriously, get a life. Why are you sitting here trying to police what other people are doing and how they write? I know I'm too busy for that. I'm trying to write. I'm too busy actually trying to write and make a name for myself as an author to sit here and tell other authors what to do with their lives. I mean, it's kind of the same idea of people telling people how to read. Like, why? I do understand that some people do want genuine advice, they want someone to listen to, and there's nothing wrong with that. When you become an author, if you don't have someone in your immediate circle who is an author that you can talk to, it can be really isolating, it can be really stressful, and you feel like you don't have anyone you can talk to. So I completely understand turning to author YouTube channels and blogs and things like that, but just always take things with a grain of salt. I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I would have for a new author going into this world and this career. Take everything with a grain of salt, even if it comes from your editor. Okay, so this is another thing that happened to me when I first started writing. I went through several different sites that listed editors. I talked to different people. After quite a bit of back and forth, after some editors ghosting me, taking my manuscripts and never getting back with me, a lot happened when I was trying to find an editor. I accepted to work with this woman and things seemed like they were going well. But I heard this advice from a famous author that said, it doesn't matter who it is, always listen to somebody else. Because, it was the idea that you get too close to your own work. So you should always listen to the editor or the beta reader or whoever it was. And it was the quote, I don't remember the exact words of the quote, but it was basically just listen to them and take their advice. And I've heard all these stories about famous authors who, when they got their book deals, the publishers were trying to make updates to make the book better or more marketable, and the author was very rigid and fought them on it. And people in the author and writing community were like, that's not a good look, etc., etc. And I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to be open to taking advice, and I never wanted to sit here and think that my work is perfect and it needs no help. I wanted help. I wanted to do better. But at the time, I didn't realize that I would get better the more I wrote. It's an oxymoron, whatever. So when I first started working with this author, or this editor, she was making changes to my books, and I was too afraid to say anything. My main character in Legends of Lightning, she was supposed to have a stutter, and my editor said it was annoying, so she got rid of it. She changed the names of one of my characters, and that was on me because I didn't realize it. Like, he only had like 2 speaking lines in the first book, but in books 2 and 3, he becomes a much bigger character, and I didn't. She changed the spelling of the name, and I'm not sure why she did that, but there were definitely things that she changed that I did not feel comfortable with, but I took the advice and I just went with it because she's the professional, I'm the new baby author. And that's on me because I didn't advocate for my work. I didn't say, no, this is how I want it to be. And in addition to that, This editor was supposed to do, developmental edits and line edits to really help with sentence structure and grammar and tighten things up. And going back and looking at it, there's a lot of sentences that I don't even know why I wrote them that way, because they sound like garbage. That could just be that I'm my own worst critic, but I should have shopped around more for better editors. And there's other things about editors that I didn't know when I first started. Now, when I started my second pen name in romance, I started looking for editors that did specific work in romance, because I had been having some misgivings about some of the editors I had worked with in the past, and I wanted to try to find somebody new. And in doing that, I found that there was a lot of things that my editors that I had worked with in the past that they were supposed to be doing that they weren't doing. The editors that I was working with in the past, they never gave me a style sheet. They never even told me what style of grammar they were editing in. Now, again, I'm not trying to point the finger and say, oh, these editors are evil. I should have known better. I admit that. This is my mistake. I should have known that. I should have shopped around more. I thought I shopped around enough in hiring my editors. I didn't. And that's one of the mistakes I had to go through and learn and grow. But now I'm finally at a point where I think I'm doing better, and I have better editors in my corner, and I know what to ask for it. I know what to look for. And in addition, I now feel comfortable reading an editor's advice and saying, no, I don't agree with that. Or saying, no, I don't want this. I think that's another thing. In addition to taking everything with a grain of salt, you need to have confidence in yourself and your own writing abilities, and being able to say, this is how I want my book to read. This is the story I know I want to tell. And that can be hard. That can be really hard, especially when you're new. So I get it. I really get it. I mean, there's definitely times where even now I have zero confidence in myself, and I need to take a step back and come back to the work to be in a better headspace before I keep going. And I'm now more confident having open conversations with editors. And that's another thing too, that I understand why some editors, like, they can't be totally open all the time to every author that they work on, because they would never get anything done. So that's understandable, but you should still be able to ask questions. You should. And if your editor won't let you ask questions, or they're very closed off, that might not be the best person to be working with. All of this ties in together to say, new authors, even if you're not a new author and you just feel like something's off, be confident in what you want your story to be. Take advice, but think about the advice critically. And I've said this in other videos, but this really goes back to the idea that you should not take criticism from someone that you would not go to for advice. Now, our work as authors is public, and we get a lot of public feedback. That's fine. It comes with the job. There's nothing wrong with that. There's going to be good reviews and there's going to be bad reviews. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Every book has good reviews and bad reviews. It's part of life. But what you need to keep in mind is that there are readers out there who love purple prose and they love really flowery writing. There's readers out there that hate it. There's readers out there that love really, really in-depth action that is explained step by step, sword swing by sword swing, and there are readers who hate that. So write what you want to write. There are so many books being published every single day. There are so many different readers in so many different genres who all have different tastes. Figure out what you want your story to be, how you want to write it, and go from there. And even if all of your beta readers don't love your book and give you critical feedback, that's still fine. They can give you critical feedback, but it shouldn't be feedback to the point where it changes the theme of your book. I had a beta reader for one of my romance books. I had a beta reader who, she read dark romance, but she also said she read paranormal romance. And paranormal is what I'm writing in right now. So I figured it would be fine. She would still have some great advice for me. She wanted me to change everything about my main male character, because the main male character in one of my paranormal romance books, he's kind of like an anti-alpha asshole character. And she didn't like him because he wasn't cocky enough and he wasn't rude. Basically, the meet cute between the two main characters is a damsel in distress moment where he steps in and saves her from being attacked by a rival shifter. And she didn't like that. She thought that he should be acting like this was beneath him and it was a waste of his time. And if I had done that, it would have changed the entire theme of the book. It would have changed the entire tone. It would have changed the entire personality of my main male character. So, in that case, that is a piece of critical advice, but it wasn't fitting for what I wanted and what I needed for my story. So, again, I'm going to repeat this a lot. I'm probably going to repeat it in a lot of future videos. Take your advice and take your criticisms with a grain of salt. Don't sit here and think that your book is perfect and has no room for improvement. But also, if you take advice from anyone and everyone, and if you try to make your book please every single person, you're not going to please anybody. So find your niche, find your readers, find your tone, and go with it. That's all you need to do. And the other thing, too, is even if there are editors or whoever that don't necessarily like the theme of your book, they can still let you know if it reads well. So there's a difference between feedback of, oh, this part doesn't make sense, and feedback saying, I hate your main character, you need to change the whole thing about it. Or you need to change the whole tone of your book to make it more angry or whatever the tone is supposed to be. So I think that that's just really important if you're a new author, if you're just starting the process of getting beta readers and editors. I think that is something that you really need to keep in mind moving forward. And self-doubt is part of the process. And I think if you have a little bit of self-doubt, I don't necessarily want to say it's a good thing, but the fact that you want to learn and you want your manuscript to be good is the first step. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous because you should have confidence in your work, and I'm not saying that you can't have confidence in your work and your abilities. I'm saying that if you're sitting there thinking, how can I make this better? That is the first step to growing as an author. And the next time you write a book, you're going to keep getting better and better. And you're going to, the more you read, you're going to pick up on, oh, this part doesn't quite work. I need to keep that in mind when I'm writing. Even if you're not actively thinking about it, the more you read and critically think about the way the book is structured or the sentences, that's going to help you. Even if you're not sitting there writing thinking, oh, in The Witcher, I didn't like this part, so I have to write differently. You don't have to be consciously thinking about it in order for it to help you. So, again, take everything with a grain of salt. Keep learning, keep trying, keep doing better, and make sure that when you vet people to be a beta reader or an editor, you vet them to the point where they have a good background. And when I say a good background, I mean if you're hiring an editor, they should tell you where they've gotten their certificates from. It should be on their websites, they should have some sort of explanation on their website about where they got their certificate and the different styles that they work with. And when you start talking to them, you should feel comfortable asking those questions and trying to figure out how they operate. And there's an editor that I personally was talking to who she was qualified up the wazoo, and I have no doubts that she would have been great at her job. Our personalities didn't mesh, and the flow of how she did things wasn't constructive for me. So again, there's nothing wrong with saying no thank you, I don't want to work with you. This is the person you're paying a large amount of money to help you fix and make your book as great as it can be. So not only do they need to be qualified, but you need to make sure that you are comfortable talking to them and having back and forth conversations and reaching out to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You need to make sure that this is a person that you can have a constructive working relationship with. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. They can be qualified, but you can clash. And that's okay. Just keep looking. There's so many editors out there that are amazing. You are bound to find somebody. There's a ton of them on Instagram. There's platforms such as Reedsy that have lists. There's oh man, there's so many of them. I can't remember all of them right now. But there's online forums where people who are professionally trained editors can list their services. I mean, there's like Fiverr and Reedsy, and there's another one that I forgot. But so they need to be trained and you need to be able to get along with them. Nothing wrong with that. And for beta readers, I have started working with beta readers who are also editors and paying them. You don't have to. I'm probably going to make another video specifically about beta readers because of that. And when you're working with a beta reader, it's okay if they read multiple genres. They just need to know what to expect from your book and be able to respect that. So in the example I gave earlier, the beta reader that I was working with, she read in multiple genres, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But she didn't necessarily respect the fact that I was not writing a dark romance. She didn't necessarily respect the fact that I didn't want my main male character to be a jackass. So it didn't work out. And that's fine. It happens. It sucks, but it happens. And if something like that happens, you need to be able to look at it critically and say, well, that sucks. We don't see eye to eye, but I'm not rewriting the entire theme and tone of my book based on what you want. So, again, take advice with a grain of salt. There's no one right way to do things. Vet your people. It's okay to be picky about who you work with on your book. That's fine. I wasn't picky. I was not picky when I first started, and that was a huge mistake of mine. So, new authors, be picky and take advice with a grain of salt. Try new things, see what works and what doesn't work. Everybody does things differently, and that's totally okay. If there is a channel or someone you are talking to who says you can only write one way, that should be a little bit of a red flag for you. Thank you everybody for joining me today. Sorry this was a video that was structured very differently than normal. I'm not even in my normal spot because the table that I usually use to set up my recording equipment is covered with paints and canvases and notes for my manuscripts. I'm a mess. But thank you for joining. I'll see if I can do a slightly more formal video for next week. Please remember, my videos are sponsored by me and my published works. So if you want to check those out, there's going to be information below. Have a great day.